Hi everyone, let's start with a debrief for section B of your AA pre-December 25 mock. I have already done the debrief for your section A, so you can go and check out the playlist. Now let's start with the debrief for section B. In this video, we are going to do the first question that we have, which is in relation to your Elm company, which is an classic audit risk question, and it contains a knowledge-based question, it contains an auditor 16 marker question, substantive procedure, and ethical based requirement as well. So it's a classic question. So I have already drafted the answers for you. So I'll not waste time typing those answers in front of you. I will, of course, explain to you each and every thing in detail. So let's start by reading the case study, reading the question, and then we'll try and understand the answers as well. Before I proceed with the drafting of the answers, I hope you people have already done the mock by your own self, and then you are watching this particular debrief, because if you have not done the mock previously, I think it will be an issue. So please do it on your own first and then listen to this debrief. Okay, let's start. So the first question is a classic knowledge based question. It does not have anything to do with your case study. If you see over here, it says you do not need to refer to the scenario for this answer. That clearly means it's a knowledge based question, a 5 marker purely knowledge based question. And this is the only area in your syllabus, the knowledge based questions, where you can actually learn something. Apart from this, you do not have to learn anything. Your audit risk, control deficiencies, internal control, substantive procedures, you don't have to learn any of these things. Only knowledge based questions is one such area that you can probably learn. If you want a PDF which contains most of the commonly asked knowledge based questions, I do have that. So you can probably comment down below and I'll share the link, the drive link with you people. So that being said, let's start. So again, briefly explain how each of the following sources of information. So we know that these are the different sources of information which auditor can use um, in terms of their evidence gathering, or when they are doing their testing, sampling, planning stage, etc. So that is what they are saying, that we need to explain why do we use the prior year audit financial statements, why do we use the current year budgeted and management accounts, why do we use the board minutes, etc. Basically, what is the purpose of the source of information that we have? All right, so let me show you the answer for this one. Hmm. All right, just a minute. Wait. Okay. All right, so this is a table. First of all, guys, for AA paper, I always say time management is really very essential. If you're not able to manage your time in AA, because guys, it's a subjective paper, it's a descriptive paper. So sometimes, we do not understand how much to write and we write a lot, which is not required. So it's always good that you understand the time management of each and every question. So it's a very small 5 marker knowledge based question. Still, I have written the time allotted as per the mark. So you people know that we always use 1.8 minutes per mark technique. So ideally we should be done in 9 minutes as per the exam. But right now your aim has to be that you are not taking the same time as you will be taking in the exam, because right now you are sitting at your own comfort. You don't have any burden on your head or exam pressure on your head, and exam pressure is a real thing, right? So make sure, if in the exam you have to take in 9 minutes, here you're not taking more than 6 to 7 minutes to answer this particular question. If you're taking more than that, it is an issue and you have to work upon it. All right. So the first one was prior year financial statements, is to gain an understanding of the trends of the financial performance, the accounting estimates, or the changes that the management probably would have done in the previous years. So gain an understanding on a company level and see what the financial statements looked like the year previous. Then the next one is current year budgets, what the management is thinking as to what is the budgets that it's setting for their, costs, their expenses, their revenues, their profits. What is the budgeting that they are doing for this current years, to understand how, we are going to do the analysis, or we are going to take the evidences, what type of risk can arise because of that. So again, that is a part of it. Then board minutes, meeting minutes, to get knowledge about the important issues. If the company is facing any sort of important issues or essential issues which the auditor should be aware of. For example, the company is taking a bank loan. So auditor has to be aware of, or the company is facing some going concern issues. So the auditor has to be aware of. And these things are all discussed in your board meetings, right? So that is what the auditor will gain the understanding of. Company website, again, very basic, to gain the basic knowledge of company, what the company does, how it operates, who are the board of directors, probably the contact details, the customer feedback, etc. So these basic details about the product, the service that the customer is offering, what is the pricing, how's the marketing going, all of these are available onto your website. Last one is discussion with the previous auditor. Again, from the previous auditor, we can discuss how the management was there any issue, how was the report, what was their opinion, any key issues that they identified while they were doing the audit, any frauds or errors that the management is doing. Again, a basic understanding of what the management is doing, how it is being conducted in the previous years, because right now the auditor is very, very new to all of these things. So he or she has to know we have to know from them, from as a first party informer regarding the company, right? Okay, so this is what you have to essentially write. Always make a tabular form in these kinds of questions. Why? Because in the question also they have given you the tabular form, so follow the exact same pattern, just type over here your answers and you'll be good to go. In the exam, you will be provided with such tables if it requires a tabular representation. So it's exactly the same as the exam also. All right, let's move to the next question, which I think is the major one. Describe 8 audit risks and explain the auditor's response to each in the planning of the audit of Oak Company. It's a classic 16 marks question. It will fetch you, as per the marks, you should be able to write at least 8 audit risks, which the question is asking us. So we will get 1 mark for the audit risk, 1 mark for the audit response. Let me quickly also explain to you the bifurcation so you understand. I understand that probably some of the students still face the issue. Guys, please watch my past paper debriefs also. In those debriefs, in the starting of the question explanation, I have given a very basic understanding or overall understanding, a detailed understanding of how to approach the audit risk. Here, I'm just giving you an overview. So whenever you're given any audit risk question, you always have to divide it into 2 halves. One half is going to be your audit risk, which is apparently going to fetch you 1 mark, and one is for the audit response, which is again going to fetch you 1 mark, one relevant mark. Now, I have seen couple of student scripts because I've evaluated a lot of scripts these days. I see that students are writing 4 5 responses. I'm not even kidding, guys. People write 4 5 responses also, which is a major issue because you do not have any extra time in your hand, nor you're getting any extra marks if you're writing 10 15 responses, let alone 4 5, right? So even if you only will be getting 1 mark per point, this is a standard rule in across ACCA. If you're writing one legitimate point, you're going to get 1 mark. So why are you as a student wasting your time on such irrelevant things, wherein you can use the same time into something which will fetch you extra marks, right? So please, guys, make sure that you're not writing any extra responses. That's the tip number one. Now, tip number two would be about the bifurcation. So if you know, the audit risk is further divided into half a mark and half a mark. So half a mark goes for my identification, which is the statement from the question wherein I identified a particular risk. That is the reason, to make you people understand better, what I have done is, for each and every risk I have bifurcated it between these two, so that you understand that you are going to get half a mark for this particular paragraph and half a mark for this particular paragraph. So basically, half a mark you get for the identification of the risk. So what do you mean by identification is, from where did you identify a particular risk from this question? So this is the same statement that you have to copy paste from the question. Exact. If you see, I've copy pasted the exact statement from the question wherein I found the risk. All right, and then you're going to explain. Now, explanation is also bifurcated into 2 halves, I would say. First half is when you are explaining what is happening, how it is getting, what is wrong, basically. All right, and the second half of the explanation is basically the impact, which is really, really very, very important. Impact on financial statements. Mind you guys, if you're not writing this impact in on the financial statements in the answer, you are losing out this half a mark completely. You're not going to get any marks for writing long lengthy case study stories or something in your answers. If you simply state the impact on the financial statements, you will get the half a mark. All right, so make sure that you do that. And by impact, what I mean is, if you're writing overstatement, understatement, misstatement, any of these, so overstated receivables, overstated revenue, overstated profit, you will be seeing that in my answer. I will be showing it to you. Second one is type of risk that we have learned: control risk, detection risk, inheritance risk, all of these risks if you're writing. So these two are the impacts majorly on the financial statements which you have to write. If you skip on writing these, you're not going to get half a mark. All right. So this is the basic, and then you're going to write the responses as well. All right. So let's start with the question now. I have given you an overview. If you want detailed overview, please let me know. Although I have already done it in some of the past papers, so you can go to the Being SSCI YouTube channel and search for AA past paper playlist, and you will be able to find that. So let's continue with our questions. All right. Okay, now let's start reading the question. So now usually what I do is I am a strong believer of time management and time saving, which is really essential for me. So what I do is I never ever read the entire case study at once, because what is going to happen, guys, once I start reading, supposing I've read this, then I read this, then I read this, by the time that I read somewhere here, I might have forgotten what happened here. Then I would have to again read it. So what I do is I read simultaneously and I start highlighting simultaneously. Whatever I highlight, I copy paste into here, which is basically my answer. I make a draft answer. I will show you how do I do that, and then I write my complete answer. I'll show you that. Let's start by reading the question. It is 1st July 2005. So dates are very important, guys. It is very essential for you to highlight the dates. It's 1st July. You are the audit supervisor at Elm Company. So this is the client, and you are this is the auditor, and you are planning the audit for the year ending 31st of July. So right now you are sitting prior to the year end, a month prior to the year end. Oak Furniture is a new, now I got my first risk. So whosoever is very good with general understanding of risk, you are going to ace this question. Why? Because if you have done enough practice, you would understand that half of the risks that we're going to identify, they're very common from whatever questions that we have already practiced. There's nothing new. Usually one or two risks of course comes new, but usually half of the risks are repetition. So whosoever student has done enough practice of the past papers or the questions from BPV Kaplan Kid will not face any issues, at least in this particular question. So if you are somebody who has already done the practice, you would know as soon as you see this, Oak Furniture is a new audit client. As soon as I see this, I know that if it is a new client, if you are a new student to me, right? I don't know anything about you. So there's a possibility that, and I don't know that you have failed the previous attempt, how much marks did you score? Nothing I know. How will be able to guide you? I will have to ask extra questions, and there's a possibility I miss something out because I don't know the history of you. Rather, if you go to your previous tutor, they know that okay, you failed at this marks, this is how you study, this is your pattern, this is how you learn, and etc. Other things as well, right? So that person will know much more about you than I will do. So because you're a new student to me, so I might not know everything which I need to know. So that is a risk over here, that audit client I am a new client. I might have a detection risk because I might not be able to identify everything, and that is upon me as an auditor because I have to do enough research and I am new to the client, right? So what I do is what I said to you, that I will simultaneously bifurcate everything. I will right now, I will not move ahead. I will copy this statement and put it over here as first, and I will put it over here. Again, answering the question, guys, you will be able to copy paste in the exam. Yes, you will be able to do so. I have received certain responses from the student. They say that I'm not able to do it on the practice platform. Probably it is not working on the practice platform right now. In the mock it is working, in the exam also it is going to work, so don't worry about it at all. So what I do is, right now I have done this. I've written the statement from the question. Now I'll move ahead. It manufactures office furniture such as desks, chairs, as well as other storage solutions. The audit engagement partner had a meeting with Oak's finance director and has provided with the following note. So here I was able to find one audit risk. Now what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to write this right now. I am going to move forward. Let me show you, and then I'll start explaining to you as well. Planning meeting notes. Oak's trading results have been strong this year, and the company is forecasting a revenue of $85 million. All right. Basic information, I should know it. Forecast, it's not actual, it is a budgeted revenue, which is an increase from the previous year. So from previous years, it has increased, which is again a good thing, but we need to see if it is a genuine increase or is it is a window dressed increase. As a result of the increase in revenue, Oak has recently recruited a new credit controller to chase outstanding receivables. All right, so we have a new credit controller in place. Let's see. The finance director has informed you that although an allowance for credit losses has historically been maintained. So basically, what are credit losses? Credit losses basically means that you as a supplier, or you as a supplier, you give products on credit to your customers, right? You say, okay, in 30 days you pay me back. Credit losses is when the customer does not pay you back and you have losses over that, right? So that is the reason they maintain the allowances for it, just like your bad debts. It's just like another terminology for your bad debts. So you always maintain an allowance of the bad debts. And okay, if I'm giving debts of, let's suppose that 10,000 rupees, 10% can be bad debt. So I will maintain a 10% of the 10,000, which is 1,000 rupees, as the allowance for it. All right, like just like a provision. Historically, they have maintained. It is anticipated that this can be significantly reduced. Now, this is a red flag for me. Why? Because why are they reducing? See, if you see over here, they are saying that our revenue is increasing. If your revenue is increasing, that means your receivables will increase for obvious reasons. You would have given more credit to your customers, more number of customers would have been there, right? So again, if these are the synchronization, there is a more possibility that you get more bad debts, right? Because there are more customers, they will demand more credit. If there's more credit, there can be more bad debts as compared to a lesser revenue. So when you have more bad debts, you can have more credit losses also, right? So if you have more credit losses, you should maintain more allowances for it. But the company is saying, no, we will reduce it. So this is my first, again, second red flag in the question. The first one was the above one. Um, just a minute. Yeah. So first one was about the detection risk. Second one is about this one, which is about the credit losses. Then why are they reducing the allowances? So now this is, you have to explain. Now what I'll do is, let me show you. Okay, so what I'll do is, the director has informed you that although an allowance for credit has historically been maintained, it is anticipated it will be, again copy paste. I will paste it over here, right? So what will happen is, now I'll continue reading like this till I reach to the end. I will also highlight it. So I'm simultaneously, let me highlight it for you people as well. Okay, let us highlight this with green so that we know what all risks do we have. Okay, so now I have done this. So I'll do the exact same thing till here. So by the time that I reach here, I will have my notes ready over here, right? So I would not have to go back to the question, read it again. I will just see, okay, new client. I will write my explanation over here, whatever XYZ my explanation is. I will write the impact. I will write the response, and I will be good to go. I don't have to read the case study twice for it. I have seen students reading the case study twice, thrice, because they have not made these notes, or probably they forget the risk while they're reading the full question. So never ever read the full question. Always go line by line, make your notes. If you want to, what you can also do is, if you want, you can also simultaneously draft the answers. Just wait, like if I got this, Draft this answer, then move to the next point, draft the answer, next point. Again, as it suits you, try this in mock, try this in past paper. I'm sure you will get something out of it, right? Now, let me show you the answers also for obvious reasons. Let's see. Okay, so statement from the question. So, again, guys, one thing I always mention is about the headings. Now, this is, I know that it is not necessary. I am also saying it's not necessary. It's not compulsory. You're not going to lose marks if you don't write the headings. You're not going to gain any marks if you just write the headings. It is just good for presentation. Because if you see, if I, as an examiner, I have to answer, check, for example, 100 plus scripts, right? I will be always in a hurry, right? And if I just see that the person has written nuclear order, I know what the person is referring to over here. I will just see the keyword, where is the keyword, where is the keyword? I'll just see that and I will be good to go with the same, right? Then I'll move ahead. I'll see the risk. I will be giving 1 mark. Then I'll move ahead. I'll see the heading. I'll see the keyword over here, overstated. I'll give 1 mark. Simple, because I, as an examiner, I don't have that much of time to read the full scenario, right? So it is good. It's not, again, it won't take you more than 2 seconds to write one particular heading, and that cumulatively won't take you more than 20 to 25 seconds to write the headings for all of the question, the full question. So I always say that it's better if you write it. If you don't, it's absolutely fine. I won't cut, nobody would cut your marks for it. All right, that's the first thing. Second thing, statement from the question. In the exam, you don't have to write this. I have just written this for your reference, so that again, you know the bifurcation between these two. So that is the reason I have written it. You don't have to write this thing in your answer. You straight away have to start like this. So what I've done is I've copy pasted the statement from the question. My half a mark is done. I've done the identification, half part done. Next part, explanation. Now I'll explain. As a result, because I explained to you that about the new person, so there will be lack of familiarity with the accounting policies. Transactions could lead to misinterpretation. So all the explanation I'm going to write over here, and then I will talk about that this is a detection risk. So here I told you people that there are two bifurcations of the explanation also. One, you explain, and then you talk about the risk associated with the same. So there is an increased detection risk, specifically non-sampling risk. But this detection risk, this is the keyword. If the examiner sees this, they will give you full mark. All right. Then you will talk about the responses. So you'll talk about additional time, probably experienced team, professional skepticism, more comprehensive testing, audit procedures. All of these you're going to talk about in this particular audit responses. Again, guys, I have written 3 responses. That does not mean that you have to write 3 responses. Here specifically, मैंने mention कर दिया है कि you only need to write one. So I wanted to give you a variety. So that is the reason I have written all of the 3. But please make sure that you're not exceeding more than 1. All right. So this is there. Then optional, you can talk about the assurance. Less assurance will be placed upon the opening balances. This is completely optional. If you want to skip, you can completely skip it. All right. Next one about the credit losses. So I again copy pasted the entire statement, which I copy pasted in front of you people also over here. Here I copy pasted the statement. Similarly, I've done it over here as well. My half a mark is done over here. Gotten half a mark, right? Next, explanation. Some balances may not be recoverable, which we talked about the bad debts, if adequate allowances for credit losses is not made. So till here, my half explanation is done. Then I'm saying there is a risk that receivables are overstated. This is going to fetch me, this full paragraph is going to fetch me half a mark. If I have missed even one of the things in this, like if the statement is missing or this risk is missing, this half a mark straight away goes for a toss. You're not going to get half a mark. All right. So that is the reason this is really important for your exam perspective. So now again, I have written about the responses, review and test the controls surrounding the finance, how the finance director, again, first of all, responses is the first instinctual response that you as an auditor have once you see an audit risk, right? Right now, I saw that they have reduced. So probably I'll just discuss with the director, what is the rationale? Why have you decreased the allowances, even though the revenue is increasing, even though the receivables is increasing? So that would be my response. So this is the first one. Then you can talk about that you can review and test the controls surrounding the finance director, because he has apparently decreased. So identifies all the potential irrecoverable debt balances, credit controls to ensure they are operating effectively. So you will again do the test of controls to see if finance director is working efficiently, operating effectively or no, or is there a problem with him also. All right. Then extended post-year and cash receipts testing and review. Again, you're going to do all of these procedures to see if the potential, if there is some problem with this or no, or how they're tackling it. Again, out of these three, any one. If you have written any one out of these three, you're good to go. All right. Okay, let's move to the next one now. All right. The company has invested significantly in woodworking and upholstery production lines at the factory, which is a good thing. During the year, it purchased and installed a new manufacturing line. All right, so they have a new manufacturing line. Again, guys, one quick tip I would want to give you over here is sometimes when we as students, we think that every liner in the question is a risk or is a deficiency or is it control. It is not, guys. If you see some students, I am 100% sure that out of 100 students, at least 10 students would have said that this is also an audit risk, that recruited a new credit control to chase the outstanding receivables. But guys, every company has their credit controllers, but then this is not impacting your financial statements. This is not impacting your financial statements. This is probably going to impact your, if you're talking about that, probably what if the controller is not working perfectly. Absolutely, yes, it can happen, but that will impact your processes. So that is a control deficiency, and that is not even a control deficiency if it is not full sentence given to you. If you're recruiting a new person in the company, it cannot be an audit risk, right? Every company hires new people, recruits new people, sends few people out, so that's not an audit risk. So you have to understand that not every line is an audit risk. Similarly here also, during the year it purchased and installed a new manufacturing. Till here we're okay, we don't have any problem. After this we might be faced with an issue, right? All the cost, wait. Mm, wait. Okay. All costs incurred in the purchase and installation of that asset has been included within property, plant, and equipment. Now I see a red flag. They say that all the cost incurred in the purchase and installation of the asset has been included as part of PPE. So you have to make sure that you know what is the criteria as per IS 16. If you do not know IS 16 property, plant, equipment, you're not going to score any marks. These capitalized costs include the purchase price of $4.5 million. So purchase price we're okay with. We can capitalize as PPE. And a 5-year service and maintaining planning cost of $0.5 million. We cannot capitalize this. And especially because this is a 5-year servicing cost. This is not even a 1-year thing. This service we're going to get over the period of 5 years, right? So this is not a current thing. So that is a reason you have to make sure that you remember or you revise all of the standards really very, very carefully. Let's see the answer for this one. All right. So as I told, headings are important. I have written the heading. Statement from the question I have copy pasted. So again, guys, another thing I would, again, very small things I'm talking about, but I know that this creates a huge impact in the paper, and I don't want you people to even lose out half a mark just for a silly mistake. All right. If you see, the risk that starts is from here, and it's such a big paragraph. So I, again, nobody is going to cut your marks if you're writing this full paragraph, because again it contains the risk, right? But it is always good if it is like a long paragraph, you shorten it down. How have I done it? If you see over here, Oak Company purchased and installed a new manufacturing line. Sim. The cost included 4.5 servicing costs and maintenance costs. So this is how I have bifurcated. You can also write included within PPE. You can also write this line. So it becomes shorter, not a longer thing, because again, examiner might get pissed off and we don't want to piss off the examiner at all. Now, first of all, again, guys, this area wherein I have referenced the standard, as per me, if you take my advice, for me standards are really important, because especially a risk like this which is completely based upon the standard, it is only about IS 16. The risk that you're going to write, the explanation, the response, everything isn't going to be in line with IS 16. So if you do not know 16, or if you have not referenced that standard over here, for me you're not going to score full marks. I don't know about the examiner, because I have read the same thing in the examiner reports. They say the same thing. And as per me also, this is the right thing, because technically if that standard is part of your explanation, you have to talk about in the risk, right? Because that is how you're justifying that this is a risk. Otherwise you cannot justify it, right? So that is the reason I have given the reference to the standard. The cost of an asset should include its purchase price, which we are good, which I told you that 4.5 million is absolutely fine, and only directly attributable cost only, as IS 16 does not allow servicing and maintenance cost to be capitalized as part of the PPE, as they are not directly related to the cost bringing to the asset to the working condition, because maintenance is a later on thing. Iski wajah se you're not bringing, if you're not doing the maintenance, you can still start working with the asset. Later on, you would require the maintenance. Similarly, with the servicing also, for current, basically IS 16 says that if I have purchased an asset, the cost that I will capitalize is कि अभी के लिए अगर मेरे को उसको काम कराना है, I have to make it working. What is the cost for it? If this cost would have been part of that, then 110% you would capitalize. But this is a later on cost which will come, not right now, right? So that is the reason you cannot capitalize it. Now, the explanation: capitalizing full cost right now will lead to property, plant, and equipment and profits being overstated. So, this is my explanation. For obvious reasons, it is overstated by $0.5 million. And prepayments, why prepayments and understated, guys? Again, one important thing I want to mention is, I also told when I was reading the case study over here, is that this is for 5 years. Wait. Right. So if you see, this is for 5 years. When I was reading it, I told you that this is not even for this current year. This is for 5 years. So technically, when you would have purchased the asset, similarly, when you purchase, supposing a laptop, you purchase a servicing, the services also, right? That okay, if it gets damaged in 2 years, I will get a replacement, right? Or an insurance or a warranty. Similarly, they've also done it. So for you can avail the service for next 3 years, but right now you're making the full payment. So for you, it is an advance payment that you're making, right? You have not used the service right now, or it is a prepayment for you, right? Similarly, over here also in the question, when we are talking about the profits and the equipment, it is 110% going to be overstated, but my prepayments, which should have recognized at this particular amount, I have not recognized it, or the advance payment that I should have recognized at 0.5 million, I have not recognized it. It will lead to prepayments or advance payments understated, because technically this should be recognized as 0.5 million, but मैंने तो कहीं और ही recognize कर दिया है, जिसकी वजह से मेरा prepayments would be understated. Since the servicing contract to 5 year period, therefore paying it currently makes it a prepayment. This line, guys, I have included for your reference, for your understanding. If you do not write this in the exam, it is absolutely perfect. I know that some students might get confused with this prepayment thing. That is the reason extra I have written over here for your reference, for your understanding, but you can simply skip it for the exam purposes. All right. Okay. The next thing that we're going to talk about is the response, of course. So we will review the purchase documentation, the document that they have made the purchase for the new manufacturing line, to confirm the exact cost of the services as does it relate to a 5 year period, discuss the accounting treatment with the finance director, and to ensure that it is aligned with IS 16. All right. Okay, perfect. Let's move ahead. In November 2004, which is this current year, but like previous year, in November 2004, Oak spent $400,000, sorry, on an advertising campaign. Okay, that's fair. It's fine. If everybody does advertising. The advertising expenditure has been incurred within intangible assets and is being amortized over 24 months, as the finance director expects the advertising to generate additional revenue over that period. He is stupid. He's simply stupid. So he is saying that I have included within intangible assets and I'm amortizing also, because I believe that it is going to get me additional revenue. But does he know that how much revenue are you going to get? Absolutely not. So as per IS 38, again guys, reference to the standard is really important. Let me explain. As per IS 38, intangible assets, you cannot capitalize advertising cost. Now, this is not just from your the standard perspective. If you generally understand it, when I am doing marketing, when I'm doing advertising, do you think this is an asset for me? Do I know if, for example, I launched a big fat campaign for being SSA and I told everything what we do and how do we help students or how do we mentor, how do we teach, etc. I big advertising campaign. For example, I had Shah Rukh Khan into that campaign. I spent for like 2 3 crores Indian INR, etc. into that campaign, right? Now I say that this is my asset because I am anticipating that with this investment, technically investment, I will generate a revenue of 4 CR. Have I received this 4 CR? Do we have any agenda or do we have any listing or do we have any documentation via which I can confirm I will receive this 4 crores? Probably not. Now, what happens is after 2 days, because social media is on a boom, people don't like the advertising. They found some social cause, social XYZ thing wrong with the advertising that we did, and they are criticizing it badly. Now, that I tried to make it positive impact on the students. Now, but the students are doing negative impact on me. They're critically appraising it, etc. So these 2 crores got lost because this revenue is going to be zero now because people don't like the advertising. What about this? What will you say to it? It is not an asset. It's more like a liability now. So that is the reason, because you are never sure. You cannot calculate how much revenue an ad is going to generate for you. Probably it is not going to generate any revenue. So it is an expense irrespective. It is a cost for you. Whenever you people, if you people have seen Shark Tank or any of these pitching the shows, or any, if you yourself would have gone to a pitching show, you always subtract your marketing advertising costs from your the costs that you're talking about, the costing that you're talking about before you arrive to your pat, right? So because it is an expense, it's not an asset, which is what the person is doing wrong. The who is doing it, the finance director, he's stupid enough to calculate it as an intangible assets, and if he's including within that, his intangible assets are overstated and expenses, advertising expenses, are understated in the profit and loss account. This is going to be your explanation, and this is going to be your impact in the financial statements. All right, let me show you quickly. Yeah, I've copy pasted the statement. I've given the reference to IS 38 that it does not meet the criteria. I've explained to you also the reason why it does not meet the criteria. Therefore, it should be recorded as an expense. Failure to adjust this will result in intangible assets and profits being overstated. As simple as that. All right. So your responses would be discuss with the management and request that they adjust this and record the advertising campaign, advertising cost and expense. Review the invoice and bank ledger account to ensure you have this was paid as an advertisement. This was paid. So you'll first check that, then you'll discuss with the management, or you can also discuss with the FD, the finance director, the reason why has he capitalized? Is he stupid? Is he mad, etc. Review the journal for the adjustment, recognizing the expenditure in the P&L once probably it has been done. All right. Okay, let's move to the next one. I think this was fairly simple for all the people. Guys, again, till here, I did not find any new risk. So any of the students who have done enough practice, they will not find any new risk over here. Let's move to the next one. On 29th of July, which is closer to the year end, again, important. As I said, it's very, very important. Dates are important. Okay. The directors announced that one of its furniture lines was being discontinued due to a fall in the demand for the product. All right. So probably one of the lines that they have, they're discontinuing, which is fine. This resulted in 4 staff members being made redundant, obviously. The payroll department has calculated the levels of termination cost. Termination cost is basically a redundancy cost associated with the redundancy, and they will be paid in August 2025 payroll. So now again, I know that this, see, the first thing, the payroll department has calculated the termination cost. All right. So this means I will have to pay some amount of redundancy cost to the employees who are getting redundant, right? But probably I right now don't know how much amount would I have to give, because this is for the next year, because our year end will happen on 31st of July, and this is talking about August 2025 payroll, right? So I need to see again, because I need to pay something in the future. So whenever we have to pay something in the future, we have to recognize a provision for it. So if I've not recognized any provision for it, my provisions will be understated in this particular case scenario, right? So this is your basic risk. Let's move ahead. Let me show you. Statement from the question, half a mark, done. Reference to the scenario, which is IS 38, talking about the provisions that in the future, because it is probable, right? It is probable that you're going to get. It's not even possible. It's probable. If a provision is not recognized, profit would be overstated and liabilities and payables would be understated. So liabilities, or you can also talk about provisions, might be understated in this case scenario, right? Obtain the calculation of the redundancy payments and agree that the provision has been included in the liability. Agree the redundancy provision may post the year end. All right. Next one. Okay. In June 2005, which was before the year end, Oak Company decided to revalue its premises, which had previously been accounted for using the cost model. So they are, as you people know, that we have cost model, we have revaluation model. So they are using the cost model. Properties with carrying amount under, wait a minute, properties with a carrying amount under the cost model was 3.8 million were revalued to 8.4 million based on the valuation performed by management. Now, this is a huge jump from 3.8 to 8.4 is a huge jump, and probably it's a malpractice that they are doing, right? The finance director also carried out an extensive review of the non-current asset lives and decided to extend the useful life of the plant and machinery from 5 years to 8 years. I see two major red flags over here. First of all, they have increased the amount from 3.8 million to 8.4 million. Probably there's an overstatement because they have not recognized it correctly, or they are using, because again as per the standard, as per the relevant standard, which is IS 36 that we're going to talk about the revaluation. And then they have to talk about the extended useful life, because they have increased from 5 years to 8 years. Probably there is a scope that they are reducing the depreciation so that they can increase the useful life of the asset, so that they can increase the asset amount, so that they can overvalue their profits, right? Because expenses will come down and profits would increase. Let's see the answer for this one. Revaluation. So property has been revalued from this. The accounting policy with respect to properties was changed during the year and property values has been substantially increased as a result. So this is a statement from the question, getting me half a mark. Next one. Explanation. There is a risk that revaluation has not been carried out as per appropriate basis IS 16, but has been decided to inflate the, which I just not told you, that probably they want to increase the asset value, they want to increase their profits, they want to decrease their expenses. That is the reason probably they want to do the same. They're inflating the same assets value in the light of the bonus, resulting in property plant being overvalued. Now, one thing I know you might be confused, why have I written this? Let me show you one line. Let's do that first. Okay. Let's read this last line first. It says, as in the previous years, the management of Oak is due to be paid a significant annual bonus based on the year end total assets. Now you see, this is how, and this is so beautifully of connecting the dots. Here you see that management is getting their bonuses on the basis of the total assets. So if total asset value increase, that is where their bonuses will also increase. So probably that is the reason they have revalued to such an extensive amount from 3.8 to 8.4, so that if the assets increase, their bonuses will get increased. So that is the reason I've clubbed these two. I've combined these two. I have given a reference of these two, that probably this is one of the reasons why they're doing so, increasing the asset life over here. Then you're talking about, then you will be talking about the responses. Should discuss the with the directors the basis, what they're doing, why they're doing, about the revaluation. Should review the assumptions also. Should agree the values of the revaluation to the non-current asset register as well. Then we have the depreciation, which I told you about IS 16. This will have an impact effect of reducing depreciation expense, which I just told you. Under IS 16, useful lives have to be reviewed annually, which is a criteria as per IS 16. And if assets life have genuinely increased, see guys, if you're not writing this, plus the last statement, you're not going to get half a mark. You have to state that, because that is the reason we are talking about depreciation here, that they have to, as per IS 16, the useful life have to be reviewed annually. If the life has increased genuinely, then only you have to talk about that. Otherwise, you cannot change it, right? However, there's a risk that this reduction has occurred to boost the profits. If this is the case, then plant and machinery are overstated and depreciation expenses are understated, and your profits are also overstated, right? So again, the we should discuss the basis. On what basis have they increased the useful life? The 8-year useful life should be compared to how often the assets are replaced, as this previous evidence in the useful life. So again, if you want to write this specifically, you can just talk about this one. All right. So we are done with 7. Yes, we are done with 7. Only one is left, but I think we have a lot more to cover. Let's see. Okay. A member of the finance team was dismissed by Oak Company in May 2005 before the year end, after it was discovered that they have been fraudulently purchasing non-current assets for their personal use. So now, if for example the company wanted 10,000 rupees non-current assets, so what that is 10,000 plus 5,000 non-current assets for their own personal use. Supposing they purchase an iPhone from company's perspective, but they're using it for their personal use. Oak Company started to investigate the fraud at the beginning of June by reconciling all the physical assets to the non-current asset register, but will not have completed the reconciliation by the year end. So probably there are more fraud to it, because till now we are reconciling. We don't know if we have reconciled well or no, if there are more assets, more fraud. Non-current assets are definitely overstated over here, because they have used it for personal use also. Rather, it was not for the company use, it was for personal use, right? So again, you are going to copy paste this statement, this particular one, and this is your risk, the risk. Okay. A member of the finance team fraudulently purchased assets for the personal use. Explanation. Now read this one very carefully, guys. I am going to read little by little. You also read it simultaneously. You can pause the video, read it, understand it, then listen to the further. The reconciliation of the physical assets to the non-current asset register will be ongoing at the year end, which they said the reconciliation will not get completed. Hence, hence there is a risk that non-current assets are overstated, as they may include the personal assets purchased, of course, because right now in my books, company books, my supposing 10,000 were the company assets, for example. It also included iPhone expenses, 5,000, which technically company has recognized 15,000 as the your company assets or your non-current assets. Let's not confuse non-current assets. But out of this 15,000, 5,000 is for the iPhone, which is for personal use. So that is the reason technically it should be 15,000 minus 5,000 and 10,000 remaining, which should ideally be recognized. But my non-current assets are 15,000 because this is included. So that is the reason it is overstated, right? This is the first point. Second thing that you're going to talk about, which I just not talked about, that there might be extra fraud that the person would have done. So that would lead to control risk. So you will write control risk is also increased if the fraud has gone undetected for a period of time, because we were not able to identify the same. All right. Next one. The finance director stated that there was problem in June in mixing of adhesives within the assembly process, which resulted in large batch of chairs having defected bonding. All right. So there was some problem with the adhesives, and there's a problem with the batch of chairs having defective bonding. So inventory is damaged. That is what I can gauge right now. A member of these, a number of these units were shipped. However, due to customer complaints about stability, no further dispatches of these goods have been made. So now customer complaints have happened. We might have to return them. So there would be a sales return for it. Let's see. No adjustment has been made to the valuation of the damaged inventory, which will be still held at cost of $1 million. Absolutely rubbish. We cannot have it at the cost. We have to have it at the lower of the NRV, which is net realizable value, or the cost as per IS2. If you're recognizing, because here it is clearly, I can clearly gauge that it would be reduced down value. Why? Because the damaged inventory is damaged. Nobody is purchasing it. Everybody is returning it, right? So damaged inventory, copy pasting the statement. I used to talk about just now. I talked about the same thing. Hence, it is likely that inventory and profits are overstated for obvious reasons. Then you're going to talk about the sales return also. It is likely that for any of the damaged goods sold, Oak will need to refund these customers. Revenue is possibly overstated if the sales return are not completely subtracted. So you know that whenever we record the revenue, we always subtract the sales return and get the net revenue. So if this is not the case, then your revenue is going to be overstated, right? Next one, last one, I think we've already read this, that bonus is based on the value of the year in total. So in case your if they can, again, window dressing, potential fraud can happen. They can have their own judgments, due to which there can be a situation wherein your non-current assets, your profits are overstated, because they want to show a good picture of it, because they have self-interest in here, right? There's a risk that management might feel under pressure to overstate the value of the assets through judgments. Therefore, this can lead to overstated balances of non-current assets at the year end. All right. So with this, we are done with this particular question. And guys, and if you see, there are 11 risk over here, and the question only asked you 8. So again, whosoever questions that, ma'am, in the question, there's no 8, there's only 7. You have to understand this, and this is not just with this question. In the exam also, you will find 2 to 3 extra risk for sure, 110%. Right? So please make sure that you're reading the lines carefully, and you'll be able to understand better. Now let's move to the next one, which is, I think, a substandard procedure question. Let's see. All right. So it's saying, describe substantive procedures the auditor should perform to print sufficient appropriate evidence in relation to redundancy cost for the year ended this one. So here we just got to know that there will be some redundancy cost. We don't know yet how much, but yes, there would be here. This paragraph you're going to refer to. Again, guys, make sure that you're not writing rote learn substantive procedures over here. Because here, if you see, they have given you such a lengthy paragraph just for your redundancy cost, and they're not fools that they give you. And also talk about this thing, and also talk about Oak Company. They're not fools if they're giving you so many indications that please don't write general procedures, right? So if it is a 5 marker, guys, please make sure that you're writing 2 to 3 as per the case scenario. It is a 5 marker, 2 to 3 as per the case specific ones. Rest can be the general ones, but make sure that you're writing at least general to specific for the same. If you're writing all rote learned answers, you might get only 1 to 2 marks. That is also maximum. Probably the examiner would cut that also. All right. Another thing for substantive procedures, I think I have made couple of different videos for substantive procedures, and please check those videos out. They will be very, very helpful for you. Past paper videos or substantive procedures, individual videos. You will understand how to deeply write them. But just to give an overview, always include 3 question answers in the substantive procedures. What, why, how. If these 3 questions are answered in one substantive procedure, and it is specific to the case, nobody can stop you from scoring full 5 marks. That is my guarantee. I know you are scared from substantive procedures. Just follow this step and you'll be good to go. I will show you how have I related them to the case scenario. Let's start with seeing the same thing. Just a minute. All right. All right. Let's first of all, again, time management, really important. I hope now we are clear with it. Quick tip I have already explained to you. Now, let me first get you through the question again, like the statement, so that you again remember what we were talking about for the redundancy provision only. So basically, on 29th of July, the directors announced that one of its furniture line was being discontinued due to a fall in demand. So we know this. This resulted in 4 staff. So 4 staff people have gone by, have been made redundant. The payroll department has calculated. So the payroll department has themselves calculated the levels of termination cost, which is your redundancy cost, associated with the redundancy, and they will be paid in August 2025 payroll run, not this year, the next year. Now we are going to see what are the substantive procedures for the same. Let me show you. Okay. So the first one says you are going to review supporting documentation such as written correspondence, written representation to confirm that the decision to discontinue the furniture line was notified to the four members of the prior staff prior to the year end to ensure that it was recorded in the correct accounting year to ensure cutoff. So now let me explain. It is essential whenever there is any redundancy happening, the staff have to be informed prior to the year end. They cannot just say that I am making you redundant today and you don't have to come tomorrow, or you're not going to get the redundancy cost, etc. You have to inform the staff prior to the year end. Before that, so we as auditors first need to see the supporting documentation, any written confirmations that we have, to see that they have discontinued the furniture line and they have also informed the staff prior to the year end, so that we know that that redundancy cost is from the previous year. It's not for the next year. It is for 31st July 2005 only. It's not for the next year, to ensure proper cutoff, that the redundancy costs are recognized in this year only and it is not going to the next year. So this is case specific. Why? Because I am talking about four members of this prior staff. I am talking about the lines that they have, furniture lines that they have discontinued. So again, if you have seen any of my videos for substandard procedures, if you have seen any of my reels also for substandard procedures, I always say that always use the terminology or the sentences from the question only to make it more case specific. So I've used this one, four members. I've used this one also in the answer to make it case specific, right? This is case specific. So again, as I mentioned, three questions you need to answer: what, why, and how. This is what. What are you doing? You are reviewing the verb, right? How are you doing it? You are taking the written correspondence, you are checking the supporting documentation. So this is how. And all of these, why are you doing all of these? To ensure correct cutoff. This is why. So three things, this is done. Statement from the question, done. Case specific, done. One full mark, done. Very simple, very easy. No, I've not even used any jargons over here. I've used the simplest of the words that we already do. Use those in the case scenario, put them over here, cumulated them over here. Next one. Agree the redundancy payments made in August 2005. So whatever payments that we have made in August 2005, we will confirm, or we can also compare. If you want to compare, you can also compare, you can also confirm, any verb you can use, to the bank ledger account. So you're going to check to the bank, again the payments, bank ledger account, then to the payroll records. And if they combine, if they compile, if they compare and the same provision has been there, then it is accurate. Payroll records, and compare these to the provisions in the financial statements to ensure accuracy of the provision payments made. So provision, for example, is for 10,000. We need to make a payment of 10,000. We have made a provision for 10,000. So payroll record should also show 10,000. Your ledger account, bank ledger also should show 10,000. And the payments that you have actually made with the bank should also show 10,000. If there's no discrepancy between these four, it is your financial statements are accurate. If there's any discrepancy between these four, then it's not accurate. So you're going to compare all of these things, agree all of these things, then you're going to see if it is accurate or no. Again, very case specific. Use the financial statement from the question. You talked about provisions, talked about the payroll records, talked about the reason why also. I'm good to go. So you see, everything that I told you before is there in my statements, in specific case scenario statements. Next one. Review the board minutes of Oak and Company, use the question name, for the evidence of decision to discontinue the line of the furniture prior to year end to ensure occurrence. So now I need to first see if this event has actually occurred, or is this a false narrative that they're spreading. So I need to see the occurrence of the event. So that is the reason I'm checking the board minutes to see if they actually discontinued the line, because the board minutes I can check off as I mentioned, that every major thing that they discuss will be in the board minutes, will be in the AGMs. So I will just check the minutes of the meetings for that particular board meeting, and I will check if this actually have discussed or no. So this is again case specific. So 5 out of 3 are already case specific. Next one. Recalculate the termination cost. So use the same word. I've not used the redundancy cost. I've used the same word from the question, which is termination cost. calculated by the payroll department of Oak Company associated with the redundancy cost to ensure it's complete and accurate. So I'll recalculate the same cost again. Again, guys, it's not specific as such, but it is general made to specific, because if you see recalculation comparison is very, very common substantive procedure. But what I've done is I've used the statement from the question, used the question name over here, talked about the payroll department, and made it case specific. So this is how exactly you can make it more case specific. Whatever general procedures that you already know, use these terminologies into your general procedures and you'll be good to go with the same. Next one is general, that disclosures are okay or no as per ICT. This is general. So again, out of 5, I tried 4 to be case specific, 1 is general. If you can do 3 and 2 also, you are in a very good position, right? I don't think so this was difficult. Very simple, very easy. Try yourself also, see where you're going wrong, make your own notes, then you'll be in a better position to answer. Let's move to the last question. I think we are good to go with this one. Let's move to the last question and then we'll be done with this particular case study. All right. Okay. So it says identify and explain 2 ethical threats which may affect Elm Company's audit of Oak Company, and for each threat recommend an appropriate safeguard. So threats and safeguards. It's a 4-marker question. So two points probably you have to write from here. Let's see. During a meeting, Oak Company's finance director mentioned to the audit or engagement partner that he is keen to align the objectives of Oak Company with its auditor Elm Company. To assist in achieving this, he has suggested that the audit fee could be based upon the percentage of the Oak's final profit for the year, and absolutely not. Your fees cannot be based upon something. The auditor's fee has to be based upon the knowledge, the experience, the time, the commitment, the basically everything that they are doing, not upon the profits, the revenues, the bonuses, etc. of the company. If this is the case, there can be a situation wherein there's self-interest threat, because my fees is contingent, is based upon the profit. So as an auditor, because if my fees, for example, supposing, let's take your example. Supposedly, you have taken my services, and you people say that, ma'am, if I will score 90 marks, then I will give you a fees. Your fees, for example, it is 100 rupees. All right, I will pay you 100 rupees, for example, but it is contingent only if I score 90. If I score 80, I am only giving you 20 rupees. So my, again, supposing only one student has said me this, and there are 100 students that I have, and only one student has said me this. So I will suppose not 100, like 10 students if I have. 100 is too much, of course not. In comparison to this example. So if you see, I will be more biased towards you. Why? Because I know that I need you to get 90 marks so that you can pay my full fees. So I have self-interest because my fees is contingent to you. Similarly, if supposingly, because auditor का work क्या होता है, auditors sees the financial statement, sees if the profit is overstated or no. If the company's profit is 10,000, they will, because if supposingly 10% is the fee, they will get 1,000. But what if the company's profit is 20,000? They will get 2,000. So their mindset will be like, let me increase the profit to 20,000, which we don't want, right? So that is the reason this is going to lead to your self-interest threat. And this is an example of contingent fee arrangement. Please, guys, it's important for you to understand these, that this word is equally important to for you to score full marks. Contingent fee is a key point, self-interest threat is a key point, and simply your responses or the safeguard has to be simply rejection. Politely reject that no, it cannot be on contingent fees. It has to be based upon the these things over your time taken, seniority, experience, expertise, knowledge, all of these to your this to the same. Or else it will be your objectivity is going to be get impacted. You will be biased. You're not independent over here. All of these things will happen, right? Okay, the next one. Sorry. Okay, so we're done with one. The finance director has asked if M Company can help identify potential acquisition targets. Discussions are currently at an early stage. No work has undertaken at this place. Absolutely not. We cannot go over there because this might seem that we are taking the sides of the client. We are talking on behalf of the client, which is absolutely wrong, and it is going to lead to your advocacy threat. So you cannot do this. Simply reject the same. potential advocacy threat. In addition, there can also be a self-review threat if the potential acquisition. So, if acquisition actually takes place, it will be a part of your financial statements, and you are only reviewing the financial statements and you have only done the acquisition. So, there can be a potential self-review threat, but this is a later stage. So, if you have just written this, you're going to get full 1 mark. This is just an additional thing that I have written. So, if it happens, you can also talk about this one also. The safeguards, again, not be will maybe accept this type of depending on the work. Care must not be taken to manage decisions. So management decisions, you're not taking it, right? Safeguards would include in using professionals who are not involved in the order to perform the services, supposedly a separate client, separate team you're putting in only and only if it is a non-listed client, which I think in your case scenario it is. If it is a listed client, absolutely not. You simply have to reject this particular thing. All right. The next one. Two already done, last paragraph left. The finance director has also mentioned that once the audit has been completed, the engagement team will invite to attend a weekend away at luxury hotel. Senior management team as a thank you. Now, thank you, they can just say as a thank you, or they can probably have a small lunch. Why a luxury hotel? Why a weekend getaway? Of course, it's an issue, it's a self-interest threat. Gifts and hospitalities are important are can be accepted only and only if it is trivial or it is inconsequential in value, but if it is luxury screams expensive, right? So that is the reason we are not going to accept this at all. Simply decline it because it is going to lead to your self-interest threat. Gifts and hospitality, I hope you remember these things. Unless clearly trivial, inconsequential keywords, all of these are keywords, it is not permitted. All right. So with this, we are done with the entire question, which is a 30 marker question. I hope you would have understood. Any doubts, any questions, please feel free to drop down or comment down below. You can also reach out to this WhatsApp number for any such other queries, etc. I will also be sharing this PDF in a Drive file. So if you want this PDF of answers which have been made by me, you can comment down below again and I will provide you the Drive link for the same. All the very best.